As for you, son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the plan. And if they are ashamed of all that they have done, make known to them the design of the house, the structure, its exits, its entrances, its design, all of its statutes, all of its laws, and write it in their sight so that they may observe its whole design and all its statutes and do them. Oh, really? You mean we have to take this seriously? Literally? Of course. And I say, well, then how can you possibly spiritualize these hundreds of details in these 9 chapters and make it apply maybe as many interpreters say, it's just a picture of the church. Oh, really? Tell me what these individual verses mean then. Or it refers to heaven. Or maybe it was an ideal temple that Zerubbabel and Joshua were supposed to implement in the second temple in Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity, but they decided not to. Friends, this is a serious interpretive problem in the Bible. Very, very serious. Okay? And I say, well, Lord, help me to make a choice right here. Even if I can't explain everything and understand everything, help me to take it literally and trust you for the understanding to come step by step, day by day, as we meditate on these details. Here's an assignment. Old professors never die, they just keep giving assignments. Are you ready for one? Make a choice. Take your pen, open Ezekiel 40, and go verse by verse through these 9 chapters, underlining the details here and there, and ask yourself when you're done, did God really expect me to take this seriously? Just try that. It's an amazing exercise. I recommend it to all amillennialists, replacement theologians. Friends, you can't take these chapters seriously without taking them literally. Okay? Well, it wasn't just Moses and David and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea and Ezekiel. It was also who else? Zechariah told exactly what's going to happen in the millennium in the Feast of Tabernacles, Isaiah 14. And if you don't show up at that feast every year, you're in serious trouble. Enforced. Joel talks about it. Micah talks about it. Daniel talks about it. Haggai talks about it. Malachi talks about it. Jesus referred to that temple in Matthew 24 when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the what? The holy place. Well, there is no holy place in the church age, but there will be then. He said, when you see something happening in that holy place, get out of Jerusalem immediately. Okay? Well, Paul talked about it, 2 Thessalonians 2:4, that man of sin will stand in the holy place, proclaiming himself to be God. And John the Apostle talks about it in Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2. All right? The church and the new covenant. How should Christian participants in the new covenant view these prophetic utterances concerning a restoration of national Israel to its land, complete with temple, Zadokian priests, and animal sacrifices, especially in the light of the emphatic pronouncements of the book of Hebrews? Well, of course, as we have mentioned, liberals just dismiss the whole thing as theologically absurd or blasphemous. Now, even some premillennialists, however, find it difficult to reconcile animal sacrifices in the millennium with the book of Hebrews, concluding that Israel's new covenant will indeed eventuate in national conversion and divine blessing in the Holy Land for 1,000 years, but without a temple, priests, and sacrifices. Dr. John Walford said, after analyzing hundreds of articles and books on this issue, he concluded, the most thoroughgoing students of premillennialism who evince understanding of the relation of literal interpretation to premillennial doctrine usually embrace the concept of a literal temple and literal sacrifices. Without doubt, end of quote. Without doubt, the large majority of dispensational premillennialists do interpret the Zadokian priesthood and animal sacrifices of the millennial age literally. They also attempt, and here's the problem we're facing mainly this hour, they also attempt to modify the supposed clash between the Old Testament prophecies of the New Covenant and the book of Hebrews by viewing these animal sacrifices strictly as memorials of the death of Christ, like the church Eucharist of the bread and cup. Such an approach may be questioned, however, and that's the main function of this paper. I don't expect in our question and answer period that many will say, I don't believe there will be any such temple. The question we face is, what is the meaning of, the purpose of these animal sacrifices? That's the thing we face this morning. The key to the entire problem may be found in answers to three questions. One, what was the true function of animal sacrifices in the Old Covenant? The law of Moses. Second, what is the significance of the fundamental differences between Ezekiel's picture of the New Covenant system of worship and the Old Covenant system of worship? And thirdly, would a worship system involving animal sacrifices necessarily represent a great step backward for New Covenant Israel during the Kingdom Age? First, what was the true function of animal sacrifices? They could never remove spiritual guilt from the offerer or clear his conscience, as the book of Hebrews says, but it is equally erroneous to say that the sacrifices were mere teaching symbols given by God to Israel to prepare them for Messiah and his infinite atonement. Such a view is contradicted by precise statements in Exodus and Leviticus. The point being, let me summarize some of this material, friends, for you. Over and over and over in the book of Leviticus, it says, if you offer a sacrifice to an appropriate priest, appropriate place in the tabernacle or temple, for a specific reason, you will be forgiven. Over and over. You'll be forgiven, 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 forgiven. Now, the amazing thing is, friends, that had nothing to do with whether the offerer was a believer or not. Did you know that? That every Old Testament Jew who offered an appropriate sacrifice to God for a specific problem he or the nation had, he would be forgiven regardless of whether he was a believer or not. Now that may come as a shock to us. And that's the whole point. It had a distinct function, you see, that we don't know anything about in the church age. Those animal sacrifices were guaranteed to forgive the offerer of what? Of infractions of God's laws and standards and holiness in his presence at the Shekinah. By the way, when the Shekinah glory, you remember, filled the tabernacle at the end of the book of Exodus, the very next chapter is Leviticus 1, showing you elaborate things you have to do as a Jew to survive physically the presence of the holiness of God in the nation. You could do something that would contaminate, pollute, corrupt the community, the theocracy, and you'd drop dead, which was very unpleasant. That was your choice. Either do this or drop dead. Thank you. It had nothing to do with being saved eternally. Nothing. I mean, when God said to the Jews as they came out of Egypt, you put that blood on the doorposts and the lintel, and when that destroying angel, when he sees the blood, he will what? Pass over you. He won't destroy you. Now, most of the Israelites, I suspect, were not believers. Only two of them actually walked into the Holy Land who had walked out of Egypt as adults. It doesn't mean the rest were unsaved. It just meant, friends, that that blood was a protective program based on what? A cleansing, purging function of the animal blood. And that's the problem you and I as Christians have. We've never seen such a thing. I have never in my life, I never expect on this earth to see a legitimate animal sacrifice on a legitimate altar in Jerusalem in the temple. How many of you plan to be here to see that?